Hey guys, tonight we wake up in ancient Greece, and the first thing that hits you isn't the sunlight, the sounds of roosters, or even the faint aroma of olive trees. No, it's the smell. That sharp, slightly sour, distinctly ancient smell of clay walls, unwashed feet, and stale barley. You're lying on a thin mat stuffed with straw, not a mattress. It crackles when you move. There's no pillow, just a folded wool cloth that smells like generations of heads have sweated into it. You blink your eyes open, adjusting to the hazy morning light drifting in from a square hole in the wall pretending to be a window. There's no glass, just a thin wooden shutter, and it doesn't quite close right. A breeze whistles through, bringing the comforting scent of sheep dung from outside. And here's your first cheeky reality check. You probably won't survive this day. Not because of war or plague, though both are good contenders, but because this world runs on customs and expectations that are about to chew you up like old fig cakes. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And if you're awake enough, drop your location and local time in the comments. I love seeing how far this sleepy little channel reaches. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You swing your legs off the mat and place your feet on the stone floor. It's cold, and there are pebbles everywhere, because floors weren't exactly a top priority in the 5th century BCE. You spot your sandals near the door, but one strap is broken and the other has been chewed. Possibly by a mouse, possibly by a child, could be either. Could a modest Athenian home, 2 rooms, mud brick walls, one small hearth in the centre, and no. If you're lucky, you have a courtyard. If you're really lucky, it doesn't double as a goat pin. Now it's time for breakfast, if we can call it that. There's no bacon, no eggs, no coffee. Instead, your meal is a small chunk of masma barley dough, soaked in water overnight and mashed into a sticky paste. Sometimes there's a drizzle of olive oil, maybe a fig if someone was generous at the market. Mostly it tastes like regret. You eat with your fingers because cutlery isn't a thing, and you wash it down with watered-down wine. Not because it's too early to drink, but because water by itself is often questionable. Some historians believe breakfast in ancient Greece was so sparse because daytime meals were utilitarian, fuel, not fun. Others think it had to do with household hierarchy. The men ate first, the women later, and slaves whenever they could. There's debate about whether children ate separately or just scavenged like pigeons around the adults. Either way, no one's asking how you want your toast. As you chew, you hear the neighbours arguing. Again, one of them is mad because someone's olive tree branches are hanging too far over the shared path. It's been 3 weeks. They've called witnesses. A trial may happen. Yes, trials could be over tree branches. This is Athens, home of democracy and eternal petty squabbles. You step outside into the courtyard and instantly regret it. The sun is already climbing and your tunic sticks to you in places that shouldn't be sticky yet. Speaking of tunics, there's no such thing as sizing. You're wearing a rectangular piece of linen or wool, belted at the waist and pinned at the shoulder. If you're rich, it's dyed. If you're not, it's bane. And you're probably not. But it's not just your clothes you have to worry about. Everything about you is under scrutiny. Your neighbours are watching. People gossip. If you speak too little, you're suspicious. If you speak too much, you're arrogant. If you wear sandals inappropriately, barbaric. Barefoot in the wrong setting, disgraceful. Even your silence is meaningful. In fact, Athenian society saw excessive quietness, especially in young men, as a sign of poor breeding or cowardice. And for women, well, silence was the expectation. Some scholars argue that the entire social structure depended on this constant, exhausting performance of knowing your place. Others say that public shame acted as a social glue, keeping people in line more effectively than law. Either way, you're sweating, self-conscious, and late. You hear a distant bell, a clanging brass signal from the town square. That's your cue. Maybe it's school time. Maybe it's market time. Maybe it's some guy reading poetry about his dead parrot. It could be anything. You shuffle down a dusty alley, avoiding the pile of fish guts someone tossed out this morning. 2 boys run past you carrying slingshots and yelling about Sparta. One of them has a chicken. Neither has pants. You're adjusting to the rhythm of a world that somehow feels both primitive and sophisticated. That's ancient Greece for you. By the way, want to use a public bathhouse? Too bad. That's a Roman thing. In Athens, you'll likely sponge bathe in cold water with ashes for soap. And if you're a woman, privacy is almost non-existent. You either bathe at night when the streets are quieter, or you bathe fast enough that no one asks questions. Now, here's a strange one. Some upper-class women would actually use white lead to lighten their skin, believing it to be a mark of nobility. You know what else they used? Crocodile dung mixed with honey, allegedly as a beauty balm. Some think this was an early skincare routine. Others argue it was ritualistic. Either way, please don't try it at home. By now, you're starting to itch. That's the linen tunic, or maybe it's lice. Either is normal. You wonder if there's a doctor nearby. There is, technically, but he's probably more into balancing your humours than fixing your rash. Still, the idea of humour theory, that your body is ruled by 4 fluids, blat, black bile, yellow bile, and phlegm, was state-of-the-art medicine. We'll talk more about that later when you start coughing and someone recommends boiled cabbage water. For now, you've survived the first hour. You've managed to eat, dress, avoid a neighbourly lawsuit, and only mildly offend the local deities by forgetting to throw a pinch of salt on your doorstep this morning. Don't worry, you can make it up to them later by sacrificing a goat, or apologising to a statue. You glance back at your clay house. It's already heating up under the morning sun. Inside, your family is going about their day. Unless, of course, you're a woman, in which case your day might consist of staying inside completely. Some archaeological evidence suggests that women were sometimes restricted to separate quarters, called the gynecoinitis. Scholars debate how rigid this division really was. Either way, as you head toward your next obligation, you're reminded of something simple and humbling. This place is not built for your comfort. Ancient Greece is beautiful, yes, but it's also rigid, smelly, unequal, exhausting, and deeply, weirdly human. And that was just breakfast. The sun is higher now, and you're already sweating. Not glowing, sweating. Like your entire body is staging a protest against the Mediterranean climate and your total lack of breathable underwear. And speaking of discomfort, it's time to address the unspoken truth of ancient Greek daily life. Hygiene was, let's say, interprety. You're walking toward what you hope is the latrine. You pass a few goats, 2 elderly men arguing about the proper angle for a funeral procession, and a group of children pretending to be hoplites with sticks and broken baskets on their heads. As charming as it is, you're focused on something more pressing. Literally, your stomach has started that ominous gurgling sound. Unfortunately, the ancient Greeks didn't invent the concept of a private toilet stall. Instead, you reach the communal latrine, a long, narrow trench with stone seats, no partitions, and absolutely no modesty. There's a water channel running through it, and someone's placed a shared sponge on a stick nearby. Yes, a shared sponge. And no, there's no soap. You stare at it for a moment, reconsidering all your life choices before reluctantly doing what must be done. Historians still debate whether these sponges were actually sanitized between uses. Some suggest vinegar or salt water was involved. Others believe the ancient Greeks weren't all that concerned about bacteria, since they didn't know it existed. What they did know was that dysentery, parasites, and cholera were frequent visitors. And you've just increased your odds. You finish your reluctant visit, wash your hands with tepid water in a shallow basin. Because let's be honest, nobody is scrubbing for 20 seconds while singing an ancient hymn, and step back into the chaos of the streets. You're relieved in one way, but definitely more anxious in another. You realise, very suddenly, how public your entire existence is here. Now it's time to get dressed properly, or at least try. You're fiddling with your himation, a sort of overcloak worn over your tunic. It's basically a giant piece of cloth you have to fold, wrap, and pin with about the same skill level it takes to make a fitted bedsheet behave. There's no elastic, no Velcro, and definitely no zippers. There's gravity, friction, and a desperate hope the wind doesn't pick up. For women, the task is even more complex. The peplos and chiton, women's garments, require a series of pleats, belts, and pins, and must convey the perfect balance of modesty and status. If your shoulder pin slips, you're either a scandal or a statue. Fun fact: the myth of the peplos inspired murder of a tyrant. That was allegedly aided by the pin of a woman's dress. Fashion can be deadly. The real challenge, though, is the body odour. Look, it's not just you, it's everyone. Soap as we know it doesn't exist yet. What they have is a rough paste made of ashes and oil that sometimes functions more like exfoliation with trauma. People bathe irregularly, often only when there's a feast or ritual coming up. You might rub yourself down with olive oil and then scrape it off with a curved metal blade called a... That's your shower. And yes, the strigil is shared too. Some upper-class folks add crushed herbs to their oil to smell better. Bay leaves, thyme, lavender. But unless you have the money and connections, you're stuck smelling like yesterday's stew and today's sweat. And don't even get me started on feet. Most people walk everywhere, in sandals or barefoot, on unpaved roads filled with dust, garbage and animal waste. It's not uncommon for even respected citizens to show up to a public event with blackened heels and blisters that look like they have their own mailing address. By the way, did you remember to shave today? Men are expected to be clean-shaven in most parts of Athens, especially if they want to be taken seriously in public discourse. But razors are crude, little more than sharpened bronze or iron, and if you cut yourself, well, let's hope your tetanus shots are up to date. Spoiler, facial hair, especially a scraggly beard, was often mocked. Women didn't shave much, but some did pluck eyebrows or remove body hair using pumice stones, seashells or even resin paste. It hurt. It still hurts. Ancient beauty, like modern beauty, often came with a generous helping of pain. You wander past a water carrier holding amphorae on a donkey cart. He's swearing about something, probably the temple tax, and the donkey looks about one sneeze away from retirement. You step aside and almost get hit by a man sprinting with a bundle of fish. He's shirtless, his sandals are flapping, and his voice is hoarse from shouting. Fresh anchovies. Like a battle cry. It's 9 a.m. The streets are dusty, narrow, and lined with stalls. Vendors sell clay figurines, old loaves of bread, and questionably sourced meat. You stop to look at some baked goods, and the seller eyes you suspiciously. She squints, then grins. You smell like a foreigner, she says. Great, as if you weren't already self-conscious. She's not wrong, though. Greeks were intensely proud of their cultural identity, and they could be quite xenophobic. If your accent is off, your clothes are odd, or you ask too many questions about how the agora works, you're going to get pegged as a barbarian. That word, by the way, came from how Greeks thought foreign languages sounded. Bar, charming. Some scholars believe that daily life in the city was a kind of performance, everyone playing their role, from the fisherman to the philosopher. Even the slaves, of which there are many, had unspoken rules and social codes. Slaves couldn't vote, own land, or marry legally, but they still filled crucial roles in households, markets, and temples. It's estimated that in some cities, slaves made up nearly a third of the population. And yet, despite all this labour, you still can't find a decent place to sit. Public benches are rare, private homes don't have sofas, and you're not about to perch on the fountain again after what happened last time. So you squat near a shaded wall and try not to think about how sticky your tunic is. A group of teenagers walks by laughing, one of them holding a lyre, another balancing a jar on his shoulder. They don't even look tired. You hate them a little. You notice a dog sleeping in the street, just stretched across the cobblestones like it owns the place. It probably does. Stray dogs in Athens were everywhere, often semi-adopted by neighbourhoods. Some even became local mascots. One particularly famous dog, named Peritas, belonged to Alexander the Great. Legend has it, Peritas once defended his master from an elephant charge. That's a lot to live up to for the mutt in front of you who is currently snoring. As the morning winds on, the sun climbs higher and you start to feel it. The heat, the weight of your tunic, the sting of sweat in your eyes, and the ache in your legs from sleeping on a glorified burlap sack. You miss chairs, you miss showers, you miss deodorant. Ancient Greece may have invented drama, democracy, and the decimal system, but it definitely didn't invent it. And here comes your final indignity of the morning. You just remembered you were supposed to bring a coin to pay the temple offering today. You didn't. Now you've insulted the gods, risked bad omens, and possibly triggered divine flatulence. You mutter a quick apology to Athena and toss a fig pit into the nearest brazier. Hopefully, she's not in a mood. You've now made it through the first layers of discomfort, the itchy tunic, the brutal public toilet experience, and the discovery that yes, everyone smells. But now it's time to enter another battlefield. Education. or what passes for it depending on who you are. If you're a freeborn male child, not exactly a well-rounded liberal arts degree. Let's assume for a moment that you're a boy, maybe around 12 years old. You trudge to class with your pedagogos, a sort of personal slave tutor hybrid who accompanies you to lessons. He's not the teacher. Think of him more like a chaperone with opinions. He probably sighs a lot, mutters that kids these days have no respect, and carries a stick. You sit cross-legged on the floor in a semicircle with other boys, while the teacher lectures in a sing-song tone about Homer, geometry, or moral philosophy. If you yawn too loudly or answer a question wrong, you're smacked with a rod or hit with a sandal. Ancient educational theory, motivation through mild trauma. Yet despite the beatings and the lack of recess, education is a serious affair here. The Greeks believed that cultivating the mind is essential for becoming a virtuous citizen. You memorize long passages from the Iliad and Odyssey, learn rhetorical techniques, and recite moral lessons from Hesiod or Solon. There's a strong emphasis on oratory, because in Athens, being able to speak well could literally save your life in court or earn you influence in the assembly. But here's the twist. Not everyone agrees on what an ideal education looks like. Some scholars in ancient Greece argued that poetry corrupts the youth. Plato, yes, that Plato, wanted to ban Homer from his ideal republic because he thought myths taught bad moral lessons. Others felt that training the body was just as important as training the mind. Hence your afternoon trip to the gymnasium, but we'll get to that in the next section. Right now, your teacher is asking you to recite the first hexameter of the Iliad. You panic. Was it, "Sing, goddess, the anger of Achilles," or "Sing, goddess, the onions of dinner"? You mumble something vaguely poetic. He raises an eyebrow. The stick inches upward. You brace for impact. Next to you, a boy whispers the correct line. His breath smells like garlic and ambition. He's clearly the teacher's favourite. He even brought his own copy of Hesiod today, wrapped in oiled leather. Rich kid. You hate him, but you'll copy his notes later. Meanwhile, one boy in the corner is doodling what looks suspiciously like a goat wearing a helmet. You admire the creativity. The teacher does not. The goat doodler is dragged outside for a brief lesson in discipline. He returns, rubbing his ear and glaring at everyone like we were the problem. It's not all doom and dictation, though. Occasionally the teacher gets distracted and launches into a dramatic retelling of a myth. Today it's about Prometheus, the titan who stole fire from the gods and gave it to mankind. The teacher gestures wildly as he recounts how Prometheus was chained to a rock, his liver eaten daily by an eagle. The kids are riveted, you're riveted, and then someone ruins it by asking if Prometheus got a break on weekend. Cue more stick waving. As you scratch another line onto your wax tablet, you notice your fingers are stiff and sore. The stylus isn't exactly ergonomic, and the wax is melting slightly in the midday heat. You shift your weight. The stone floor is unforgiving. Your legs are asleep, and your foot is tingling in that alarming, may never walk again kind of way. But you don't move. If you disrupt the class, you might be asked to recite Pythagorean theorems in front of everyone. Outside, you hear someone playing the aulos, a reed flute that sounds like a duck arguing with a snake. Music education is part of the curriculum too. Boys are taught to sing hymns, play instruments, and memorize choral pieces for public festivals. Some kids love it. Others, like you, find that it mostly triggers migraines. There's a sudden silence. The teacher has stopped talking. Everyone turns. One of the boys, let's call him Cleon, has fallen asleep sitting up. His head lolls, his mouth is open, and he's snoring like a contented goat. The teacher walks over, raises the stick dramatically, and stops. He chuckles. Let him dream of Sparta, he says, and the class eruption of a rare moment of mercy. Now here's the odd part. Despite the harsh conditions, most of the boys here are eager to learn. Literacy is a powerful tool in Athens. If you can read, write, and speak persuasively, you can participate in politics, compose poetry, argue in court, or become a philosopher. If not, you might end up cleaning latrines with that same communal sponge from earlier. And yet, scholars still argue about the accessibility of education in Greece. Some believe it was widely available to free boys. Others say it was mostly for the elite. What's clearer is that girls were excluded almost entirely, except in rare cases. Sappho, the famous female poet from Lesbos, is an exception. Her poetry, filled with emotion and lyricism, was widely admired even by men, but she's a rare outlier in a sea of silence. The school day ends not with a bell, but with the teacher waving you off as the sun begins its downward arc. You stand, stretch, and feel your joints creak. Your tunic has bunched up in strange places. Your wax tablet is smudged. But you survive. For now. You walk home past vendors shouting about olives, potters hammering away at amphorae, and back at home your mother hands you a bowl of lentil soup. It's lukewarm and mildly crunchy. You don't ask why. You just eat. You're too tired to care. Your father is muttering about the assembly tomorrow. Your sister is spinning wool. The pedagogos is snoring in the corner, possibly dreaming about beating children with more enthusiasm. You sit on your mat and rub your aching legs. The clay walls glow orange from the setting sun. You made it through another Greek day, and you've got the splinters, bruises, and mild educational trauma to prove it. Only 12 more hours until sunrise. You're up early again, or maybe you never really slept. It's hard to tell when your bed is a glorified pile of hay and your dreams keep starring that teacher's sandal chasing you across the Acropolis. Either way, today brings a new kind of challenge. Work. Forget modern job perks. There's no dental plan, no paid leave, and certainly no espresso machine humming gently in a staff lounge. In ancient Greece, if you want to eat, you work, and not in a reply to emails while sipping matcha kind of way. No. This is calloused hands, sunburnt knee, sweat in your eyes, back-aching labour. Unless, of course, you're rich. Then your full-time job is pretending to think deeply in the shade while other people break their spines for you. But you, dear time traveller, are not rich. You're average. Maybe slightly below average. So today, you're off to join the beating heart of Greek society, the labour force. And guess what? That might include being a slave. Let's be clear. Slavery in ancient Greece wasn't about race, but it was absolutely brutal. People were enslaved through war, debt, piracy, or being born into it. They were cooks, miners, cleaners, cleaners, tutors, and sometimes even clerks. Some lived relatively decent lives with families and tasks in homes. Others were condemned to silver mines where life expectancy could be measured in months, not years. It's sobering, it's disturbing, and it's everywhere. Some scholars estimate that 1 in every 3 people in Athens was a slave. 1 in 3. That means nearly every household that wasn't destitute had at least one. Even public institutions used slave labour. The city's police force comprised mostly of Scythian slaves armed with whips. Imagine being arrested by a guy in a leather skirt who doesn't speak Greek and really doesn't care if your sandals are authentic. Today, though, let's say you're not a slave. You're a free citizen. But that doesn't mean your life is cushy. You've been apprenticed to a potter, the kind who makes amphorae, those long-necked, two-handled jars used for storing wine, oil, or grains. You enter the workshop and are instantly hit by the smell of wet clay and smoke. There's dust in the air, fine, red, and clinging to your lungs like it's paying rent. The master potter grunts at you without looking up. He's busy turning a lopsided jar on a crude foot-plougher wheel. Near back, a kiln glows faintly orange like an oven ready to ruin your day. Your job? Mix the clay. It's a disgusting, exhausting task. First you walk to the pit where the raw clay has been dumped. It's the texture of cold oatmeal and smells like something crawled in and regretted it. You kneel, sink your hands into it, and start kneading. You mix water, sand, and old bits of broken pottery into the mass, all while dodging the occasional rat and ignoring the sound of someone retching outside. Turns out, not everyone has the stomach for pottery. Some historians argue that ancient Greek labourers had an admirable work ethic. Craftsmanship was respected, and even humble trades could bring pride. Others think it was pure survival. You're leaning toward the latter as your fingers go numb in the clay sludge and your back starts begging for mercy. Eventually the clay is ready. You haul it over in baskets and slap it onto the workbench. Now comes the shaping. The master throws the lump onto the wheel and begins turning it. He's fast, almost hypnotically so. You're mesmerized for a moment watching the jar take shape from nothing. Then he hands you a lump and says, "Your turn." Oh no. You sit at the wheel and push with your foot. The wheel turns slowly. Your hands shake. You press too hard and the clay collapses like a deflated goat bladder. The master snorts. Again. You try again. Collapse. Again. Again. This continues for hours. Eventually, you produce something vaguely bottle-shaped. It leans slightly, and there's a suspicious dent in the side. But the master nods like, it's hideous, but at least it exists. You beam with pride. He immediately smashes it with a stick. Do it again. By midday, your arms are jelly. You've inhaled enough clay dust to build a house from your lungs alone. You take a short break, eating a piece of bread so hard it could double as a weapon, and sipping warm water from a cracked jug. Around you, the workshop buzzes. A teenage boy is sketching mythological scenes on a finished amphor little stick figure. Cheesy women in togas. A man with missing teeth is loading fired jars onto a donkey cart. You nod at him. He nods back. You're part of the team now. Some potters made good money, especially if their work was sold to temples or exported. Amphorae were big business, used in trade deals across the Mediterranean. A well-crafted jar could end up in Egypt, Italy, or even modern-day Spain. It was a small connection to a big world. Still, most potters didn't get rich. They got arthritis. If pottery's not your thing, don't worry. There are plenty of other terrible jobs to choose from. You could be a tanner, soaking animal hides in urine until your skin permanently smells like despair. Or a full-time fisherman, throwing nets for hours and praying to Poseidon you catch something before the seagulls start judging you. Or maybe a rope maker, a scribe, a brewer, a stonemason. And yes, there were jobs for women too, especially poor women. Some worked as vendors, selling food or fabric in the agora. Others were midwives, mourners, professional criers, or temple servants. And of course some were prostitutes, ranging from street-level workers to the famed hetae, educated companions who mingled with philosophers and politicians. Even among the marginalized there was a hierarchy. You decide to stick with pottery. At least jars don't talk back. The afternoon stretches long and hot. You haul clay, you fetch water, you stoke the kiln and burn your forearm on the rim. You curse quietly and are told not to offend Hephaestus. The god of fire and craftsmanship might be watching. You apologize to a pile of ashes, just in case. There's a brief moment of joy when one of the amphorae you helped make is declared passable. The master grunts. Mont shamus. It's the highest praise you've gotten in 2 days. You're elated. Then someone drops it. You sweep up the shards and accept your fate. By sunset, you're filthy. Your hair is matted. Your arms are sore. You smell like clay, smoke, and disappointment. But there's also a weird satisfaction. You did something real, something permanent. Somewhere in the world, maybe years from now, someone will dig up a broken pot with your fingerprint baked into the side. They'll put it in a museum. You'll be anonymous, but you'll be there. You limp home under a sky streaked with orange and purple. The air smells like roasted onions and tired dogs. You pass a woman singing to her baby in a doorway. An old man is snoring next to a sack of onions. Somewhere, a lyre plinks gently in the fading light. You reach your home, strip off your dust-caked tunic and rinse your face with cold water. It stings. It's glorious. You eat quietly with your family. No one talks much. They're all just as tired. Your father says he may take you to the agora tomorrow. You're too exhausted to dread it. Your sister hands you a small bundle of herbs. You lie down on your mat, aching, blinking up at the stars flickering beyond the open shutter. Somewhere, an owl hoots. Somewhere else, a dog barks at absolutely nothing. You close your eyes and let the dust settle. You've survived another day in ancient Greece. Somehow. Morning, again. It's barely dawn, but the sky's already bruising into a pale orange, and you've got that dreadful feeling, the one you get when you know something's expected of you, but you're not exactly sure what it is. Then it hits you. The gymnasium. That sacred, confusing institution where boys become men, philosophers flex their metaphors, and elderly men stare entirely too long at naked wrestling. Welcome to the ancient Greek equivalent of a wellness centre, mixed with a locker room, a university seminar, and just a hint of This is definitely unsanitary. First things first, you've got to get there. You shuffle through the dusty streets, passing olive sellers already yelling about last season's harvest like it's some kind. The gymnasium is a sprawling open-air complex with high stone walls, inner courtyard, shaded colonnades and more philosophical ego than a modern-day startup incubator. You pause at the entrance, watching a group of young men grapple in the dirt, their bodies slick with olive oil and pride. Yup, naked, this is happening. Because in ancient Greece, physical perfection isn't just a vanity project, it's a moral duty. Arete, the ideal of excellence, blends body and mind, discipline and beauty. And part of living up to that ideal, training your body. Publicly, with minimal shame. Or clothing. You undress, trying very hard not to make eye contact, and rub yourself down with oil, provided in large clay jugs nearby. It's thick, golden, and smells faintly of bay leaves. You tell yourself it's luxurious. You tell yourself it's tradition. But really, you just feel like a well-seasoned roast. Then you grab your striggle, a curved bronze scraper, and head out to the training grounds. The surface is packed earth, a little gritty, a little slick. Already athletes are practicing javelin throws, sprinting down dusty lanes and wrestling in pairs. You pick a spot on the edge, hoping no one notices that you're built more like a poet than a warrior. And then, of course, someone calls you out. "New face," shouts a boy who looks like he was carved from marble and ambition. Wrestle? You want to decline. You really, really do. But refusing would be suspicious, unmanly, possibly even unpatriotic. So you nod, drop into a crouch, and instantly regret it. Wrestling in ancient Greece is a whole ritual, more technique than brute force, more dignity than violence. You're supposed to aim for throws, trips, and holds. No biting, no gouging, but still, it hurts. You lunge, he sidesteps. You fall. You try again. He grabs your waist and flips you like a sack of onions. You land in the dust, gasping, and he offers a hand. "Not bad," he says, which is Athenian for, "At least you're not dead." You thank him and limp away to the edge of the court, where you scrape the oil and sweat off with your strigil. It clinks as it hits the bowl. That clink is the only thing holding your dignity together. Nearby, a group of older men is seated beneath a portico, watching the athletes and discussing philosophy. That's the other half of the gymnasium, the mind part of RT. These men are known as sophists, or sometimes philosophoi, and they love nothing more than a good debate about the soul, virtue, or whether chairs exist when no one's sitting in them. One of them gestures to you. You shuffle over. "Tell me," he says, stroking his long beard like he's about to reveal the secret of the universe. "What is justice?" You blink. He waits. You mumble something about fairness, maybe laws, and not stealing figs. The group hums. One of them smirks. Another strokes his beard in unison. This is how Socratic dialogue works. Say something, get mocked, go home confused. It's an educational style built entirely on making you doubt your own existence. This is the world that birthed Plato, Aristotle, and Socrates. These thinkers transformed not only their own society, but the entire Western tradition of logic, ethics, and metaphysics. But here's the kicker. Socrates himself never wrote anything down. What we know of him comes from others, like Plato, who made him a central character in dialogues that sometimes feel more like stand-up routines with heavy moral undertones. And yet, for all their intellectual weight, philosophers weren't always respected. Aristophanes once wrote a comedy portraying Socrates as a cloud-gazing weirdo who taught boys how to talk themselves out of paying debts. Some Athenians thought all this thinking was dangerous, leading youth astray, questioning tradition. Eventually, Socrates was tried and executed for corrupting the youth and disrespecting the gods. So yeah, don't get too clever. You nod along politely as one philosopher tells a long anecdote about a tortoise, an arrow, and the nature of motion. Halfway through, you realize he's trying to explain Zeno's paradox, which basically says you can never actually reach a destination because you always have to cross half the remaining distance first. It's deep, it's frustrating, it makes your brain hurt. You escape the conversation by pretending to need water. You head to the fountain and splash your face, trying to scrub off both sweat and existential despair. A boy nearby is practicing discus throws with the kind of reckless abandon that makes you consider moving out of the blast radius. The gymnasium isn't just for exercise or debate, it's a crucial social hub. Politicians, poets, artists and generals all come here. Friendships are forged, alliances formed, and gossip traded like gold. Some even consider it a dating scene, though we won't get into the full complexities of ancient Greek relationships here. Let's just say, the line between mentorship and very blurry. Scholars continue to debate how normalized these relationships were, especially the ones between older men and adolescent boys. Some argue it was part of an established cultural tradition with its own rules and expectations. Others say it's been over-romanticized, and the power imbalance was deeply troubling even by the standards of the time. Either way, it was real, and it was messy. You finish your training with a jog around the perimeter, dodging a goat that wandered in through the open gate. No one seems surprised. The goat is just part of the gym now. He's in better shape than you. You wipe your face with a rough linen cloth and feel every muscle screaming. Your thighs ache. Your back is a disaster. Your dignity is hanging by a sandal strap. But weirdly, you also feel a little proud. You showed up. You tried. Before leaving, you toss a few drops of oil onto a small altar near the entrance. A quick nod to Heracles, patron of athletes. Superstition runs deep here. You don't want to tempt fate, or cramps. As you wrap your tunic back around your sore, olive-slicked body, you catch sight of a sculptor chiseling a statue in a corner. It's a new commission. Some athlete who won 3 events in the last Pan-Athenic Games. The marble figure is already emerging, lean, strong, noble. You wonder if he ever fell on his face in the dirt like you just did. Probably not. Or maybe yes, but history only remembers the pose, like you just did. Probably not. You limp home under the midday sun, skin glowing, ego limping. At home, your family barely glances up. You smell like victory and gym sweat. Mostly gym sweat. Your little brother pinches his nose. You flick water at him. It becomes a whole thing. That night, as you lie on your mat, sore and exhausted, you think about the gymnasium. The strange mix of brute strength, naked philosophy, and olive oil. It's not a place for the weak. But neither, you realize, is ancient Greece. Your joints are still sore from yesterday's heroic flop at the gymnasium, but today you're in for a different kind of challenge. Understanding what it's like to be a woman in ancient Greece. Now, assuming you magically woke up this morning and found yourself as a female citizen in Athens, your day starts a little differently. You don't stroll off to the agora, or debate ethics in the gymnasium, or wrestle with strangers while covered in olive oil. You stay home. You stay very, very home. The walls of your father's or husband's house are not just walls. They're your whole world. The oikos, or household, is the core of your existence. This isn't just a suggestion. It's a rule. Your role is clear. Stay indoors, run the household, obey your male relatives, raise children, spin wool, and most importantly, don't get noticed. Fame and honour? Those are for men. For women, the highest compliment is being so modest and invisible that no one outside the family even knows your name. And yes, that's a real quote. One ancient Greek orator literally said, "The greatest glory for a woman is to be least talked about by men." Cheers to that empowering motto. So, you shuffle to the hearth, barefoot on cool tiles, your hair pinned up in coils, your dress a layered peplous cinched at the waist. You prepare bread dough while directing a household slave to fetch water from the well. You've probably done this exact routine every day for years. It's not glamorous. It's not easy. And women in ancient Greece, especially in Athens, were legal minors. You couldn't vote, own property independently, or file lawsuits. Your father or husband managed your finances, spoke on your behalf, and made any serious decisions for you. If you went outside, it was with a veil over your head and a chaperone by your side. If you lingered too long in the market or laughed too loudly in the street, people talk, and in a society this obsessed with public reputation, talking is dangerous. Now, here's where things get interesting. While Athens was all about locking women away behind modesty and domestic duties, other parts of Greece had different ideas. Take Sparta, for example. Spartan women were encouraged to be physically strong, outspoken, and even politically influential in their own way. They exercised, raced, and were known to publicly shame cowardly men. There's a famous quote attributed to a Spartan woman who, when handing her son his shield before battle, said, "Come back with it or on it." Yeah, Spartan mums didn't play. Scholars still debate how much of this contrast between Athens and Sparta is based on reality, and how much is idealized or exaggerated. Some believe that Athenian women had more informal power behind closed doors than the public record admits. Others argue that even those backroom influences were extremely limited, and women's autonomy was basically non-existent unless they were widowed. Back in your Athenian home, you finish kneading the bread and move on to weaving. This isn't just a pastime, it's one of the core activities women were judged on. A good woman makes good cloth. Full stop. The myth of Penelope, wife, rounds around her endlessly weaving by day and secretly unravelling by night, buying time against wanted suitors. Her virtue wasn't measured by courage or cleverness, but by her ability to sit still and weave like a champ for 20 years. You sit at a wooden loom threading wool dyed in natural colours, brown, red, and that mysterious bluish hue made from fermented sea snails, which smells about as delightful as it sounds. Your fingers are rough, your back is stiff, but the fabric grows stellarly. This is your contribution, your legacy, your armour. Occasionally you may venture out to fetch water, visit a shrine, or attend a funeral. These are rare exceptions. Festivals, however, are a different story. Certain religious ceremonies allow women outside in greater numbers, especially those dedicated to female deities like Demeter and Artemis. Take the Thesmophoria, for example, a mysterious women windfall festival held in honour of Demeter, the goddess of grain and fertility. Married women would leave their homes and camp out for 3 days, fasting, singing, and performing secret rituals involving buried piglets and fermented offerings. What did they actually do there? Nobody really knows. That's the point. The details were so private that even male writers had to speculate. Of course, not all women were confined to the domestic sphere. Some women, especially metics, foreign residents, or slaves, were part of public life, whether they wanted to be or not. The heterae, for example, were educated courtesans who attended symposia, exclusive male drinking parties, engaged in intellectual conversation, and formed relationships with powerful men. The most famous Hekera of all, Aspasia of Miletus. She was the companion of Pericles, the Athenian statesman, and was said to be brilliant, articulate, and politically savvy. Some historians even speculate that she helped draft parts of his speeches. Yet even Aspasia, with all her influence, was still technically an outsider. She could charm the elite, but she'd never be accepted into polite Athenian womanhood. Too public, too visible. Back in your household, your husband returns from the agora. He smells like fish, olives, and masculine entitlement. He sits and eats first. You wait, serve him, and then eat whatever's left. If he brings guests, you disappear. Your voice isn't meant to be heard in male company. Some houses even have separate rooms for men and women, so the two worlds never collide unnecessarily. These were called the antron and the gyneco. And yes, if you speak out of turn or fail to do your duties, you can be sent back to your father's house in disgrace. No alimony, no Instagram sympathy posts, just shame and possibly a lecture from a priest. But there's resilience here too. Within these walls, women form deep bonds with sisters, daughters, slaves, and neighbours. You trade remedies, stories, and whispered prayers. You make herbal concoctions for coughs, keep the household accounts on a wax tablet, and pray daily to the goddess Hestia to keep the hearth burning and the rats out of the grain. You endure, quietly. And sometimes, when your husband is off debating taxes or throwing grapes at someone in the agora, you slip out quietly. Just for a moment, you pull your veil tight and walk to the temple of Athena. You kneel before the statue carved from stone and shadow, and offer a small loaf of bread shaped like a turtle. You ask for patience. You ask for strength. You ask for a world where your daughters can be something more. You walk home slowly, your sandals tapping against the stone, passing men who don't even look twice. To them, you're just a figure, a shadow, a background character in their epic. Because you're surviving a world that wasn't built for you, and doing it with grace, endurance, and just a touch of quiet rebellion. So, you've spent some time inside those clay-coloured walls, glimpsed the delicate and often invisible burden placed on ancient Greek women, and maybe, just maybe, you're hoping the public sphere is a bit more fair, more open, more, democratic. Well, let's talk about that, because today you're heading to the very heart of Athens' pride and joy, democracy. But don't get too excited. You're about to learn that ancient Greek democracy was a little like a public pool, refreshing for a select few and absolutely off-limits if you didn't meet the dress code. And that dress code? You had to be male, freeborn, Athenian, and of age. That's it. If you're a woman, a slave, a metit, still, you tag along to watch, because even if you're not allowed to speak, ancient Athenian democracy is quite the spectacle. You arrive at the Phoenix, a steep hill overlooking the city, with its grand open space carved out for the assembly. It's not a building. It's a massive stone platform with room for thousands of men to gather, argue, and eventually vote on everything from grain imports to declarations of war. The sun's barely risen, but men are already pouring in, clutching cloaks and figs, muttering about the price of amphorae. There's no central government as we know it, no presidents, no parliaments. Instead, it's all direct democracy. Every eligible male citizen votes on laws and policy, by a show of hands or by casting pebbles into urns. It's chaotic, it's passionate, it's pure civic drama. You try to blend in, sitting on the edge of a dusty outcrop near some loud-talking farmers. One of them is chewing something that smells suspiciously like fermented garlic. Another is already dozing off. But then, the Kerux, the official herald, steps forward and raises his hand. Silence falls. Someone's about to speak. And not just anyone. Which is the ancient equivalent of, get to the point. Then another man stands, counters the argument, makes a case for peace. A third follows, questioning both, waving a scroll that probably no one asked to see. You're starting to realise, this is less about calm discussion and more about competitive rhetoric. It's a verbal brawl in togas. A curious fact, anyone could speak in the assembly, as long as they met the criteria, even someone poor, someone uneducated. That's why oratory skill was such a big deal, because saying the wrong thing badly could cost you everything. Imagine standing up to suggest a new policy and being laughed off the stage by a crowd of 5,000 tunic-clad critics. No pressure. And yes, public shaming was a real hazard. There was even a law against speaking madness in the assembly, though what counted as madness often depended on whether people liked your idea. Some scholars argue this served as a social check on demagogues. Others think it just reinforced existing power dynamics, since wealthy elites had more education and influence to begin with. Suddenly, someone next to you whispers that a gratia paranomen has been filed. That's a legal accusation, claiming a proposed decree violates existing laws, which means today's debate might end not with a vote, but a trial. You brace yourself. This is going to take a while. Because here's the thing about Athenian democracy. It's obsessed with participation, but it's also deeply tangled in bureaucracy. You've got juries with hundreds of members. You've got rotating public officials selected by lottery. You've got ostracism. Yes, the actual political process where citizens vote once a year on who should be exiled for 10 years. All it takes is enough people scratching your name onto a piece of Imagine getting voted off the island by your neighbours for being just kind of annoying. And while you're chuckling about that, remember, there were no career politicians in Athens. Most positions were temporary, randomly assigned and unpaid, except for jurors. They got a small fee, which means for many citizens the only way to consistently make money from the state was jury duty. You don't know whether to laugh or cry. Suddenly, there's a disturbance. A man near the front is being heckled loudly. Turns out he tried to speak while being in debt to the public treasury. That's a big no-no. If you owe money to the state, your right to speak is revoked. Permanently. So much for free speech. You glance around at the thousands of men packed into the space, and something clicks. This democracy isn't really for everyone. It's a club. A very vocal, very judgmental club with high entry fees and no air conditioning. The ideals are noble. Participation, civic duty, rule of law. But the execution? Messy. Exclusionary. Flaws. And yet, revolutionary. This is the first major experiment in self-government in the Western world. It's imperfect, sure, but it lays the groundwork for every republic and democracy that comes after. You feel it, this tremble of historical importance, even as a man nearby burps loudly and scratches something unspeakable under his tunic. The sun is higher now, a vote is called, arms rise in waves, a sea of sunburnt elbows, a decision is made. You don't even know what it was about. You stand, brush the dust off your legs, and follow them downhill. Conversations swirl around you, some angry, some excited, some just hungry. A group of men is already debating what to drink with lunch. One suggests unmixed wine. Another slaps him and calls him a barbarian. You pass by a small group of metics sitting outside a tavern. They watch the assembly too, quietly. They live here, work here, pay taxes, but they'll never vote. They nod politely as you walk by. One mutters, "Nice that they let us cheer, at least." You think about that, about who's allowed to speak, to be heard, to make decisions. The world may be built on words, but not everyone gets a turn at the podium. Back at home, your neighbour is ranting again, this time about a leaky roof and the cost of amphora repairs. He gestures wildly with a half-eaten fig, and your father mutters something about damn populists. You slip away to the quiet corner of the courtyard and sit for a while, listening to the breeze. You've seen the assembly, you've witnessed democracy in its infancy. It's exhilarating and exhausting, hopeful and hypocritical. It makes you want to shout from the rooftops, and also never leave your house again. But one thing's for sure, in ancient Greece, politics isn't something that happens to people. It's something they are, something they live, every day. And that's the real kicker. You've survived a day of democracy, and congratulations. You didn't get ostracized, mocked, or publicly exiled. That's a win in Athens. But now it's time to dive into the real jungle of the city. If the Panax was the political brain of ancient Athens, the Agora is its twitching, yelling, fish-smelling heart. This is where business, gossip, religion, black market deals, philosophical debate, and goat traffic jams all collide in one big dusty square. It's chaos, it's commerce, it's Athens in full swing. You make your way there at dawn, because if you arrive late, you're going to be stuck behind every cranky olive vendor and every street poet trying to get discovered. And you really don't want to get blocked behind a philosopher and a cheesemaker arguing about the soul of dairy products. Again, you step into the Agora and bang, you're hit by it, the sound. It's like walking into a festival where the theme is mild hysteria and strong cheese. There are vendors hawking onions with the enthusiasm of auctioneers, bakers slapping loaves of bread on tables like they're making a point, philosophers pacing in slow circles muttering to themselves, a man juggling fish, a teenager juggling smelly fish. The smell is layered. Let's call it Mediterranean market funk. You get sharp hits of garlic, salted anchovies, roasting lamb, fresh herbs, unwashed feet, and something that might be donkey sweat. It's overwhelming in the most theatrical way. The Agora is where everyone and everything shows up. Farmers with baskets of figs, soldiers on errands, playwrights looking for inspiration, and street performers who really should not be performing. One guy is reciting Homer while balancing on one foot. Another is pretending to be a statue of Poseidon, but the seaweed on his head keeps sliding off. You duck between two stalls, one selling bronze combs, the other loud chickens, and realize that this place isn't just a market. It's the social network of Athens. No scrolls required. If you want to know who's cheating on whom, or selling fake saffron, or whether the oracle at Delphi predicted a bad harvest, this is where you come. You pass a vendor with amphorae stacked precariously like ceramic Jenga. He's trying to convince an old woman that his olive oil is pressed by the purest virgins. She narrows her eyes and says, "So were your wine jugs last week, and I got diarrhea." His smile tightens. Nearby, a group of men in chitons are deep in discussion. You slow down, pretending to admire a jar of honey, but you're eavesdropping. They're talking about the Peloponnesian War, politics, and whether Sparta's discipline is secretly a cover for cultural bankruptcy. One of them quotes Heraclitus, another counters with Euripides. Then the third one, clearly drunk, shouts. The conversation ends in laughter and backslapping. You pretend to be invisible. Historically, the agora wasn't just a farmer's market. It was also a business hub, a religious centre, and a legal zone. Temples and shrines dotted the square. You might see people pausing to toss an offering to Hermes or whispering prayers to Aphrodite before negotiating prices on dyed wool. The divine and the mundane existed side by side. Today, a man kneels before a small altar to Zeus Agorios. Zeus. Speaking of shady dealings, the black market is very real here. Beneath the official bustle, you'll find the side trade: fake Egyptian amulets, foreign slaves, possibly stolen scrolls and miracle herbs, sold by men with suspicious beards. If you're bold or foolish, a particularly strange merchant is selling charms against curses. He claims they were blessed by a priestess of Hecate. The little clay tablets have inscriptions and what looks like goat hair attached. You're tempted, just a little, but you walk on. At the centre of the agora is the Stoa of Atalos, a long, shaded colonnade where philosophers, artisans, and generally important-looking people loiter. You join the crowd, listening in on a man who seems to be having a passionate debate with himself about justice. He slams his walking stick down for emphasis. No one interrupts. They know better. A funny thing about the agora is that even the most ordinary person might suddenly become the centre of attention. A trial could break out right here in the street, with a jury summoned on the spot. A man might stand on a box and announce he's running for office, then get pelted with overripe fruit. It's democracy on full display, with a side of theatre and a hint of riot. In fact, many scholars believe the agora is the origin of the word agoraphobia, fear of the marketplace, because being here means being seen. You're always being watched, judged, measured by your words, your posture, your sandals, your choice in fish. Some people thrive on it, others, not so much. You sit near a fountain and watch an old man trying to sell scrolls of poetry. He reads aloud in a booming voice, even though no one is listening. "Behold the sea. Like bronze it burns," he shouts. A child throws a fig at him. He ducks and keeps going. And yet the fire doth churn. Moments later, you spot a familiar face. It's the boy from the gymnasium who pinned you like a dried leaf on wrestling day. He's now selling cucumbers. You catch his eye. He grins. "Wrestling and agriculture," he says. "Double the heroism." You manage a weak thumbs up and slink away. Then the bell tolls. A deep clang from the clock tower signals the start of official business. Messengers scurry past with scrolls. A herald shouts announcements. What's word? Something about road repairs and stolen donkeys. A priest announces a purification ritual will happen at dusk, and people must stop washing vegetables in the sacred fountain. Again. You pass a man sketching the scene. Charcoal on papyrus. Quick strokes. He offers to draw your profile for 2 obols. You decline, partly because you're broke and partly because you're 90% sure he just draws the same nose on everyone. Your final stop is a modest food stall run by 2 women who absolutely do not care about male-dominated debate or bronze coinage. One hands you a bowl of lentil stew. The other says, "If you spill this, I'll hit you with a spoon." You nod solemnly. You will not spill. You sit in the shade of an olive tree, chewing slowly, watching the agora pulse with life. It's a place where gossip has wings, where arguments double as entertainment, and where democracy breathes loudly, messily, sometimes drunkenly, but always in motion. Historians still argue over how much the agora shaped public life. Was it truly inclusive, or just a noisy echo chamber for elites? Some scholars think it was a melting pot of all classes, a democratic playground. Others insist it mostly reflected the will of the wealthy and well-spoken. Either way, it worked, after a fashion. You rise, bowl empty, head spinning from the noise and heat. As you leave, you see a man arguing with a statue of Athenian, claiming she owes him money. No one intervenes. They've seen worse. By the time you reach home, your ears are ringing, your cloak smells like fish oil, and you've somehow ended up with a beet in your pocket. You've survived the agora, and honestly, That might be your greatest achievement yet. You slept like a rock after yesterday's Agora madness, although you still don't know how a beet ended up in your pocket, or why you dreamt about debating fig prices in front of a jury of chickens. Today, though, your aching body and skeptical mind are in for something different. You're not heading to the marketplace or to be body-slammed by olive-slicked teenagers. Today, you're not consulting merchants or philosophers. Today, you're sick. It starts with a slight headache and a scratchy throat. You blame the fish fumes, or maybe the dust from the Agora, or possibly the fact that you've eaten nothing but barley, lentils and judgment for 4 days straight. But within hours you've got chills, your stomach is doing flips, and you're officially ready for what the ancient Greeks called medicine, and what modern people might call... So, what do you do? Well, the ancient Greeks didn't really have clinics or hospitals in the modern sense. Instead, they had temples, especially those dedicated to Asclepius, the god of healing. So you drag yourself, wrapped in your wool cloak like a sad burrito, to the nearest Asclepion, or healing sanctuary. You arrive to the smell of incense, crushed herbs and damp stone. The temple is peaceful, full of hushed voices and the slow patter of sandaled feet. You shuffle through a small courtyard filled with votive offerings, little carved limbs made... The priest greets you with a reassuring smile and absolutely no gloves. He examines your pale face, feels your forehead, then waves over a helper to fetch the tools. These tools include a bronze blade, some sponges, a jar of honey, and what appears to be a bundle of leeches. You gulp. This is fine. Everything is fine. Before anything happens, though, you must prepare for healing by undergoing a ritual purification, because sickness isn't just physical. It could be the result of a spiritual imbalance, a divine warning, or that time you forgot to offer a pinch of barley to Apollo. So you bathe, you fast, you chant, you lie on a stone slab cloaked in ceremonial linen, and try not to sneeze on a god. Then comes the most famous part, incubation. You're led into a quiet chamber where patients sleep overnight, hoping to receive a dream sent by Asclepius. In this dream, the god may appear and whisper a cure, perform divine surgery, or just give you cryptic hints like, avoid eels. You lie down on a straw mat under a flickering oil lamp. The room is quiet, too quiet, until you hear it, the soft hiss of snakes. Yes, snakes, sacred, slithering, non-poisonous serpents roam freely in these healing temples. Some wrap themselves around the columns, some brush against your arm, some curl up beside your mat and blink at you with ancient, judgmental eyes. The priests say this is good, a blessing. You're trying to be open-minded, but let's be honest, you're quite pleasingly open. At some point in the night, you slip into a dream. You're in a marble garden, and a tall figure with a staff and a snake twined around his arm says, "Drink more vinegar and chew fennel." Then he turns into a goat. You wake up confused, sweaty, and slightly itchy. In the morning, the priest listens carefully to your dream and nods solemnly. He mixes a remedy: honey water, crushed garlic, ground sage, and possibly a sprig of donkey hair. He chants a few words, sprinkles some oil, and presses the concoction into your hands. You drink it. It tastes like betrayal. But here's the thing. Ancient Greek medicine wasn't all superstition. They had Hippocrates, the so-called father of medicine, who developed theories that, while flawed, were impressively systematic for his time. Hippocrates believed in the balance of the four humours: blood, phlegm, yellow bile, and black bile. Illness was caused by imbalance: too much of one, too little. So if you had a fever, too much blood. The cure: bloodletting. Coughing and congestion, too much phlegm. The cure: maybe some bitter herbs or fasting melancholy. That's ex-black bile, treated with exercise, better diet, and cheerful company. Or wine. Your priest today is half spiritualist, half humour theory enthusiast. He decides your humours are out of whack. His solution? A mild purge. No, not that kind of purge, though that may come later. He hands you a small ball made... Later that afternoon, you're curled up on a mat back at home, clutching your stomach, when your neighbour stops by. She brings a poultice made from boiled leeks and onion skins, passed down from her grandmother. "Apply to the soles of your feet," she says, "and the pain will run out through your toes." You nod gratefully. You apply it. It smells like regret and salad. Meanwhile, your father is shaking his head. He needs boiled octopus ink, he says. Your mother counters with hot vinegar and garlic steam. Your sister just shrugs and hands you a rock shaped vaguely like a nose. For luck, she says. You curl up, sweating, praying to every god from Apollo to that one minor deity of digestion nobody really talks about. Eventually you sleep, and while modern medicine would probably diagnose your ailment as dehydration, food poisoning, or possibly a mild flu, you can't deny that the ritual, the prayers, the strange concoction, all of it, had some effect. Maybe not on the illness, but on you. You feel cared for, witnessed, held in something larger than your own body. Later you hear about another patient at the temple, a man with chronic leg pain who claims Asclepius healed him in a dream. The god cut open my thigh, removed a worm and sewed me up with stars, he says. Now I can dance. People clap. No one questions him. But here's where it gets interesting. There are records, hundreds of inscriptions, carved into stone tablets, left at Asclepian temples, describing the healings. Some are mundane, sore throat cured after drinking warm wine. Others are less so. A woman dreamed a dog licked her eyes, and she woke up seeing. Some say the temple's environment, calm, clean, quiet, actually helped. Others believe the rituals triggered a placebo effect. A few skeptics scoff at it all, but even modern doctors admit there's power in belief, in community care, in the simple act of lying down and being told you might get better. By the next day, you're improved. Whether it was the garlic, the snake dream, or the sheer fear of being bled again, you're not sure. But you're upright, walking, breathing through both nostrils again. You return to the temple to offer thanks, leaving behind a small clay votive in the shape of your liver. Why the liver? You don't know. The potter was out of throats. As you exit, a new patient enters, a boy with a limp, clutching a wooden cane. He looks terrified. You give him a nod. The snakes are friendly, you whisper. He doesn't look reassured. You head home under a pale sun, feeling like you've lived through a miniature myth. Maybe the gods helped you. Maybe the priest just got lucky. But either way, you're alive. And that's more than can be said for a lot of people who drank random vinegar blends in this city. And hey, if your fever comes back, at least you know exactly where to find that guy with the magical buttock votive. You've survived illness, been nibbled by sacred snakes, and downed potions that would make modern pharmacists cry into their microscopes. And now, just as you're beginning to feel like you might finally enjoy a peaceful, normal day in ancient Greece, just once, a single sneeze, loud, sudden, and echoing off the clay walls of the courtyard. Everyone stops what they're doing. Your neighbour gasps. Your mother looks horrified. A passing slave mutters something and immediately spits on the ground 3 times for protection. Because in ancient Greece, that sneeze wasn't just a sneeze. It was a sign. Welcome to the bewildering, exhausting, endlessly fascinating world of everyday superstition and the supernatural. A realm where your toast landing face down might be a message from Hades, and knocking over a wine jug could mean your crops are doomed. Again, the ancient Greeks didn't separate religion, magic, and daily life the way we often do today. For them, the divine was everywhere. The gods weren't just stories, they were temperamental, powerful, and constantly watching. They lived in the wind, the trees, the rivers. They hung around in the shadows of your home, in the corners of your hearth, and sometimes in the awkward silence between you and the fishmonger who shorted your olives. So yes, sneezes, spilled oil, stubbed toes, even dreams. Everything could be a message from beyond. After your sneeze, your sister insists you sit down immediately and wait 3 full breaths before doing anything else. If you sneeze and walk at the same time, Hermes will lead you in the wrong direction, she says with total confidence. You've never heard this one before, but that's the thing with Greek superstition. Everyone has their own set of rules, and they're all convinced theirs are correct. You decide to sit, just in case. Later, you go to fetch water from the public fountain, passing a row of tiny roadside shrines, little box-shaped structures on pedestals, filled with offerings, coins, bread, grapes, olive oil. These herms, or roadside statues, are everywhere. They're sacred and people take them very seriously. You once saw a man trip over one and immediately offer half his lunch to appease Hermes. He looked miserable, but no one questioned him. You pass a small gathering of women at a shrine to Hecate, goddess of crossroads, magic and ghosts. They're whispering, burning herbs and laying out offerings of garlic and fish. One of them has a small wax doll in her hand. It looks eerily like someone specific. You don't stare. You don't ask. You definitely don't interrupt. Because that's probably a form of sympathetic magic. A ritual where a person uses dolls or effigies to influence another's fate. They might be cursing someone, or asking Hecate to protect their home, or both. The gods are multitaskers. Back at home, you ask your father whether people really believe in all these omens and rituals. He raises an eyebrow and says, "When I ignored a bad omen before a sea voyage, my friend got struck by lightning." Then he sips his wine as if that closes the case. Superstition in ancient Greece wasn't just tolerated, it was woven into the cultural fabric. Athletes wouldn't compete without performing rituals. Politicians consulted seers. Soldiers refused to march if the animal sacrifice turned up a bad liver. Yes, you heard that right. The entrails of sacrificed animals were believed to contain messages from the gods. A liver with an odd colour? Cancel the invasion. The spleen looks weird? Postpone the wedding. And those weren't fringe ideas. Harspical, the reading of animal entrails, was an official part of state rituals. Some scholars think it was a way to buy time or manipulate public opinion. Others believe. Feeling curious, you ask a local priest what the gods think of, say, walking under ladders. He looks confused, then says, "That sounds Roman, but we don't whistle indoors. Hades might be listening." Good to know. You walk to the temple of Apollo, hoping for something more uplifting. Apollo, god of music, light and prophecy, is known for his clarity. His temples are clean, organised, and smell less like dead goats. You light some incense and leave a few dried figs near the altar. Someone next to you is drawing lots. A small ritual to seek divine advice. They toss marked pebbles into a bowl, count the results, and declare. You don't ask how the math works. You're just impressed that the donkey finally got a vote. But by far the most famous form of divine insight in ancient Greece was through oracles, and none was more powerful than the Oracle of Delphi. People would travel for days, even weeks, to reach her. They'd bring gifts, fast, purify themselves, and then pose their questions to the Pythia, the priestess who served as Apollo's mouthpiece. She'd inhale vapours, enter a trance, and deliver cryptic prophecies. Questions like, should I go to war? Is my husband cheating? Will my crops grow next season? And answers like, beware the rising sun behind a dog's tail. Or, victory will come, but at great cost. Useful? Depends on your decoder ring. Even today, historians argue about what really happened at Delphi. Some think the Pythia inhaled ethylene gas from underground fissures, causing altered states. Others believe the entire experience was guided improvisation, part performance, part religious ritual. Either way, the prophecy shaped major political and personal decisions for centuries. One wrong interpretation could lead to disaster. Case in point. King Croesus of Lydia allegedly asked the oracle if he should attack Persia. The answer? If you cross the river, a great empire will fall. Encouraged, he attacked, and his own empire collapsed. Classic Pythia move. But it wasn't just high priests and royalty chasing divine signs. Regular people constantly looked for meaning in the mundane. A crow circling overhead, a broken pot, a whisper in a dream. One man claimed he'd received a divine message because his cat knocked over a jug right before his neighbour offered to sell him a goat. He bought the goat. It ran away. He still says it was fate. You stop at a small apothecary stall near the agora. The woman there sells charms, little carved stones tied with string, dry flower bundles, bronze amulets shaped like eyes or hands. She sees you looking and hands you a tiny terracotta owl. For protection against envy, she says. You hesitate, then buy it. Maybe it works, maybe it doesn't, but it's cute, and you don't want to risk angering Athena. As the sun lowers, you pass by a group of children drawing symbols in the dust. One of them is pretending to be a seer. He waves a stick, closes his eyes, and declares, "The gods say my sister will trip on a goat tomorrow." She throws a pebble at him. It's a perfect reenactment of Athenian democracy. You arrive home and find your mother placing laurel leaves above the door. "For purification," she explains. Then she spits 3 times over her shoulder. You try it. It feels ridiculous, but strangely satisfying. Later that night, as you lie on your mat, you hear distant chanting. Someone in the neighborhood is burning herbs and singing to Selene, goddess of the moon. You peek through the window and see pale smoke curling up into the stars. And for a moment you get it. In a world without science as we know it, where crops fail without warning, illness strikes randomly, and neighbors can accuse you of curse casting, it makes sense to search for signs, to believe in patterns, to find comfort in rituals and gods and clay buttocks and moonlight. You pull your blanket up, clutch your little terracotta owl, and let the day's omens drift away. After all, the gods may be watching, but at least tonight they seem in a good mood. This morning you wake up to a familiar, slightly crunchy breakfast and an unfamiliar feeling. Hunger. A real, honest, stomach-rumbling kind of hunger. Maybe it's the aftermath of temple purification and leech-assisted healing. Or maybe the food. Now, don't get your hopes up. You're not about to enjoy a 3-course gyro platter with tzatziki on the side and a soft pita made by a cheerful vendor in clean clothes. No. Today we're talking real, ground-level Athenian eating. The kind that reminds you ancient Greek cuisine was equal parts survival strategy, seasonal availability, and creative use of. You begin the day with akrotisma, the standard ancient Greek breakfast, which is as fun to eat as it is to pronounce. It usually consists of yesterday's barley bread soaked in diluted wine. If you're feeling fancy, you might add a smear of olive paste. If you're really lucky, there's a fig involved, but mostly it's soggy, sour, and slightly sad. Like cereal, if the milk was grape-flavoured and fermented. After choking that down, you wander toward the kitchen. Well, kitchen corner. Greek homes didn't really have kitchens as we'd imagined them. Cooking happened in courtyards, over clay hearths, or in shared communal ovens. You see smoke rising already, curling above rooftops like ghostly fingers, each one carrying the scent of something either delicious or desperately trying not to be inedible. Mid-morning, your neighbour stops by with a bundle of herbs, thyme, mint, oregano, and something that may or may not be edible. She offers you a taste. You chew. It's bitter enough to convince you your tongue might be cursed. She smiles and says, "It's good for the blood." You nod, still chewing. And chewing. It never ends. Later you head to the agora to pick up supplies for the main meal. The food stalls are a chaotic mix of promise and peril. Fresh fish lies on beds of damp straw. Chickens peck at dropped barley seeds underfoot. Olives, in every state of wrinkled glory, are stacked in clay bowls, shining like greasy black pearls. You buy a handful of lentils, some onions, and a year-long internal debate, an extremely dubious-looking eel. The fishmonger insists it's fresh. You note that it appears to be glaring at you from the basket. "Still twitching?" he says proudly. You don't point out that it's twitching in a way that suggests long-term trauma. Back home, your mother is grinding grain in a stone quern, an exhausting process that leaves your arms aching after 5 minutes. She's making maza, a doughy cake made from barley meal and water. It's the backbone of the ancient Greek diet. Not glamorous, not flavourful, but reliable. Like the culinary version of a dependable but slightly boring uncle. You help stir a pot over the hearth. Inside, lentils, garlic, and a suspicious amount of vinegar. It smells sharp. You sneeze. Your mother nods approvingly. That means it's working. Now, let's be honest. While the average Athenian's diet was nutritious by necessity, high in grains, legumes, and olive oil, it was also repetitive. Barley, lentils, onions, garlic, maybe a bit of cheese made from goat's or sheep's milk. Meat was rare, reserved mostly for festivals, sacrifices, or if something died unexpectedly and no one asked too many questions. And even when meat was available, it came with a catch. You usually didn't eat the best parts. Those went to the gods. In a sacrifice, the organs and bones were burned as an offering, and the remaining cuts, if any, might go to the priests, then the guests. You're hoping for a bit of liver? Still, once in a while a feast occurs. A symposium, an all-male dinner party, where reclining guests sip wine, recite poetry, and try not to choke on pickled fish. If you're not of the elite class, you'll never see one up close, but you hear the stories. Roasted hare, honey-glazed pastry, sweet wine in fancy cups, and entertainers juggling fruit or telling off-coloured jokes about Zeus. You glance down at your meal in carbon linen and sigh. You are not at a symposium. You are at whatever we didn't burn yesterday, and can still chew. Midday the food is ready, the family gathers on mats, there's no table. You eat with your hands, scooping up lentils with chunks of bread, chewing quietly, trying not to inhale a garlic clove whole. You sip watered-down wine, not to be dainty, but because undiluted wine is considered barbaric. That's a real thing. The Greeks believed only uncivilized people drank their wine straight. You're civilized, so you're sipping your grape juice like a philosopher with a mild hangover. There's talk of shortages. The olive harvest hasn't been great this year. Some say it's because of the omens. Others blame trade routes being disrupted by pirates. Either way, olive oil is more expensive. And when olive oil becomes scarce in Greece, it's like coffee disappearing in a modern office. Panic, rebellion, existential despair. To make things worse, some merchants are hoarding grain. There's a law against it, but enforcement is flexible. You hear rumours of a baker being flogged for mixing sawdust into loaves. You hope it's just a rumour. You'd really prefer your bread without wood chips. In the evening, as the sun bleeds into the horizon, you take a stroll past a public dining area where poor citizens sometimes receive state-sponsored meals. It's part of Athens' democratic welfare system, basic support for the needy. It's humble food, but it keeps people fed. And it's another reminder that, for all its faults, this society does try to care for its own. At least, sometimes. Back home there's a surprise. Someone brought figs. Sweet, soft and rich. You tear one open, the juice sticky on your fingers, the flavour bursting like a tiny edible poem. You don't say anything. You just smile and eat. Slowly, even in a world of barley paste and questionable eels, figs still feel like a miracle. There's one last ritual before bed. A small offering at the hearth. You crumple a bit of bread and pour a splash of wine into the flames for Hestia, goddess of the home. The fire flares briefly. You whisper thanks, not just for surviving, but for the warmth, the fool, the fig. For one day of enough. Because in ancient Greece, food wasn't just sustenance. It was a ritual, a philosophy, a symbol of life's fragile balance. Feast and famine, comfort and caution, generosity and gods. And in a world where famine could come with one bad harvest, one storm, one war, it's not just what you eat that matters, it's how you eat it. Slowly, thankfully, together. You curl up on your mat, stomach full for the first time in a while, the air carrying the scent of wood smoke and fennel. Outside, someone's singing softly. Probably about wine, probably off-key. You smile. Because today, you weren't hungry. You're jolted awake before dawn by a sound you were starting to recognise far too well. Shouting. Loud, panicked shouting. Echoing through the narrow streets like an alarm clock made of pure dread. You sit up, heart pounding. Someone outside is yelling, "To arms! To arms!" which is ancient Greek for "Congratulations, citizen, today's your day to go to war." Welcome to another delightful surprise in your ancient Greek adventure. Military service is not optional. In modern terms, you'd be checking your calendar to see if your name came up in the draft. In Athens, though, if you're a freeborn male citizen between the ages of 18 and 60, military service is considered part of your civic duty. You don't just live in the polis, you fight for it. Period. You stagger to your feet, throw on your grimy tunic, and join the growing throng of nervous, sweaty men heading toward the armory. There's no uniform, no standard issue gear. Instead, each hoplite, Greek foot soldier, is responsible for providing his own armour and weapons. If you're wealthy, that means gleaming bronze greaves, a polished shield emblazoned with a noble family symbol, and a deadly sharp spear. If you're not, well, You get what you can beg, borrow, or hastily carve from firewood. Your gear today consists of a dented helmet that smells like pickled onions, a cracked breastplate that definitely doesn't fit, and a round wooden asbestos shield that may or may not have once served as a tabletop. You're handed a doru, a long spear, a zaphus, a short sword, and a piece of stale barley bread for morale. You try not to look terrified. Nearby, an older man is carefully tying his sandals with the kind of focus you imagine gods with a lightning bolt placement. Another is shouting at a teenager who forgot his helmet entirely. The youth shrugs. "My uncle said I have a hard head." Someone laughs, someone else starts crying. You just keep moving. You're herded into formation with your lochos, a small unit of men from your neighbourhood. The officer, a stocky veteran with a voice like thunder and a face carved out of granite, shouts commands. You're not entirely sure what he says. It's something about honour, victory, and not vomiting during the march. The march begins. Your shield is heavy, your spear digs into your shoulder, your helmet bounces slightly with each step like a small, angry anvil. Dust clouds rise with every footfall, coating your tongue and eyes. Your sandals chafe. You already hate your life. But you press on. Because everyone does. Because that's what you do in ancient Greece when your city calls. Now, let's pause here for a historical reality check. Hoplite warfare wasn't just chaos, it was choreographed chaos. Formations mattered. Discipline mattered. The phalanx, a tight block of shield-bearing soldiers, was the cornerstone of Greek military strategy. Imagine standing shoulder to shoulder with your fellow citizens, shields overlapping, spears thrust forward, like a human tank. Strength in unity, death in disorder. You're taught to march in time, to step as one, to move, not like a person but like a wall, with legs. Eventually your unit reaches the staging ground outside the city walls. Other city-states are gathering too, some your allies, some your rivals. You spot the Corinthian soldiers, their helmets crested, their shields shimmering in the morning light. You hear someone mutter a prayer to Ares, god of war. Another mutters to his mother. Then comes the part you were dreading, waiting. There's a long pause while the generals debate. Messengers run back and forth. Someone points at a hill, someone else gestures at a goat. No one moves. You sit on a rock, chewing dry bread, trying not to think about what comes next. A boy near you throws up. A man next to him nods approvingly. Better now than on the battlefield. Then a trumpet blares. You stand, line up, lock your shield to the man beside you, grip your spear until your fingers cramp, and march forward. The battle, if it can be called that, is more of a terrifying blur. The two phalanxes crash together like angry waves. You hear screams, clanging bronze, the dull thunk of spear hitting bone. You jab forward blindly, duck, shield, stumble. Your world narrows to the 2 feet in front of you and the absolute certainty that someone behind you will trample your spine if you fall. You stab, you yell, you barely know who or what you hit. Eventually, after what feels like hours, the trumpet sounds again. A signal to retreat. Not because you've lost, but because, in many Greek battles, it wasn't about total annihilation. It was about pushing the enemy to break formation. If their line falters, they lose. If yours holds, you win. You stagger back, breathing like a winded ox. You're bruised. You're bleeding. You're alive. You look around. Others are not. The wounded moan softly. A man sits clutching his arm, staring at a piece of bone sticking out. A boy clutches a charm around his neck, whispering prayers. The medics, if you can call them that, move among the injured with wine, bandages, and occasionally a knife. Amputations aren't uncommon. Anesthetics are non-existent. You sit, cry, laugh, all at once. And then you're summoned. Because there's another ritual to perform. The burial of the dead. In Athens, this is sacred. The fallen must be honoured, their names recorded, their bodies buried or burned with ceremony. The city often erects public monuments listing every name. Not generals, not kings. Everyone. And that's the strange, brutal paradox of Greek warfare. On one hand, it's savage. On the other, it's steeped in duty, dignity, and shared sacrifice. That night, as the fires burn and the city returns to its routines, you lie in the dust with your shield beside you, staring at the stars. You think about everything. The sound of armor clashing, the way the light caught your opponent's eyes, the boy who dropped his helmet, and the man who never got to eat his barley bread. You think about how war isn't a story. It's sweat, it's terror, it's blood in your ears and the silence after a scream. And yet, this is your role, not because you love it, but because, in Athens, to be a citizen is to be a soldier. And to be a soldier is to know the cost of freedom, of land, of law, and to carry that cost on your back, in your scars, in your shield. Before sleep takes you, you whisper a prayer, not to Ares, but to Hestia, to go home, to sit at your hearth again, to never pick up that spear. But you know you will. Because tomorrow, you may be needed again. Your body is battered, your shoulder bruised where your shield strap bit into your flesh, and your ears are still ringing from the sound of clashing bronze. But today, you're not on a battlefield. You're not mixing lentils, dodging fish in the agora, or being wrestled into the dirt by sweaty teenagers. No, today, you're doing something almost luxurious by ancient Greek standards. You're going to the theatre. Not the kind with reclining chairs, overpriced popcorn, and air conditioning. No, this is something far more raw, far more human, and yes, slightly windier. The theatre of Dionysus, the beating cultural heart of Athens, sits just below the southern slope of the Acropolis, and it's where the entire city gathers to laugh, cry, and occasionally throw turnips at actors. You arrive early, very early, because seating is general admission, and unless you want to watch from behind a column, you've got to hustle. You're not alone. Thousands of people are already streaming into the semicircular theatre, dressed in their festival best, which, to be clear, is just their cleanest tunic, and maybe some extra hair oil. Today's event is part of the City Dionysia, a massive multi-day festival held in honour of Dionysus, god of wine, madness, and theatre. It's equal parts sacred ritual and civic spectacle. Plays are performed, prizes awarded, and citizens reminded, through drama, that the gods are watching, fate is fickle, and hubris is a very bad idea. You find a spot on the stone benches, no cushion, no backrest, just cold limestone and the promise of emotional whiplash. Around you people chat, chew dried figs and slap their neighbours on the back. Some are already drinking. One man has brought a wineskin and zero impulse control. The choragas, a kind of sponsor-producer, steps forward and dedicates the play to Dionysus. Offerings are made. Incense burns. A few actors warm up by shouting poetic lines into the wind. Then the first chorus enters, dancing, chanting and gesturing with exaggerated flair. You sit back, and the story begins. The first performance is a tragedy, a slow, heavy tale of pride, prophecy and doom. The hero, played by a masked actor in towering platform shoes, discovers he has unknowingly killed his father and married his mother. You stare, stunned. So does the audience. This is Oedipus Rex by Sophocles, and it's not exactly a feel-good matinee. You watch as the masked actor staggers, tears his robe, and curses fate. The chorus responds in rhythmic song, lamenting the cruelty of the gods and the blindness of men. People around you gasp. One woman openly sobs. Another mutters, "Should have listened to the seer." In between plays there's a break. Vendors hawk roasted chickpeas and dates. You stretch your legs, and overhear two men debating whether fate is truly inescapable or whether Oedipus just made terrible decisions. The guy with the wineskin says, "Everyone marries their mum," metaphorically. No one responds. The next play begins, and this time it's a comedy. The masks are larger, more grotesque. The chorus members are dressed as frogs, or maybe birds. It's hard to tell. The main character struts onto the stage and immediately launches into a monologue about flatulent and politics. The crowd roars with laughter. This is Aristophanes. Sharp, sarcastic, brutal. His plays poke fun at everyone, Politicians, philosophers, warmongers, no one is safe. A character that's definitely a thinly disguised Socrates floats through the air in a basket, babbling nonsense about clouds. People in the audience point and laugh. Someone throws a date pit. You laugh too, because for once the tension in your shoulders eases. You're not on guard. You're not starving. You're not dodging sacred snakes. You're just laughing. And it's not just fun. It's political. Comedy in Athens was a way to criticize the powerful, to vent public frustration, and to expose hypocrisy. It was catharsis with punchlines, a civic release valve wrapped in fart jokes. Then, back to tragedy. You sit through a drama where a mother murders her children to punish her cheating husband. You're horrified. The audience sits in tense silence. When the final monologue ends, the chorus steps forward and reminds everyone, this is what happens when the gods are ignored. Historians still debate the true purpose of Greek theatre. Was it religious ritual, a tool for civic education, mass therapy, all of the above? All some say the tragedies were cautionary tales, helping citizens grapple with moral complexity. Others think the real draw was the visceral thrill of watching kings fall and secrets unravel. But what everyone agrees on is this: theatre mattered. Attendance was encouraged, sometimes even paid for, by the state so poorer citizens could attend. Actors were respected, though not as much as orators, and winning playwrights were honoured like Olympic athletes. You sit through 5 hours of performance. Your legs are numb, your back is a nightmare, but you're wide awake, because you've just seen your own fears, hopes, doubts, and dreams acted out in the open air, by men in masks and sandals. And it worked. As the final chorus exits and the crowd begins to disperse, you linger a little longer. You watch as actors bow and remove their masks. Behind the stern father was a young man with a crooked smile. Behind the sobbing mother, a tall man with dust on his nose. You smile. Then someone behind you starts booing, loudly. The second tragedy was weak, he yells. No depth. Too many gods. Another man joins in, and that chorus, off-key. Soon a full argument breaks out, complete with hand gestures, references to previous plays, and accusations of poor taste. It's delightful. Because yes, even art is debated in Athens. Passionately, publicly, loudly. The judges take notes. Prizes are being tallied. Playwrights will win or lose based on applause, audience feedback, and maybe a bit of politics. It's like a talent show where the prize is immortality, and the risk is being mocked for decades. As you walk home under a rose-tinted sky, your mind spins. You're thinking about Oedipus, about the chorus, about whether you'd marry your mother if a seer told you not to. You're also still thinking about the man who played Socrates in a diaper. It's going to take a while to unsee that. At home, your sister asks what you saw. You say, everything. She laughs. So, another day in Athens? You eat a bowl of lentils, hume a song from the play, and stare into the fire. The crackling reminds you of the applause. The smoke smells faintly like the incense from earlier. And somewhere deep inside, you understand. You've lived 1,000 lives today. Through masks, through music, through stories so old and raw they still echo in your chest. This is theatre in ancient Greece. No popcorn, but plenty of soul. It's a quiet morning. No shouting in the streets, no frantic calls to arms, no chorus rehearsals outside your window. The agora's distant hum hasn't quite started yet. Even the chickens seem unusually contemplative, pecking at the dirt like they're reflecting on the tragedies of yesterday. You're sitting in your courtyard, sipping thin wine and staring into the embers of the hearth, when a thought slinks its way into your head. What happens when we die? Because here in ancient Greece, the line between the living and the dead isn't as rigid as you might hope. The afterlife is a shadowy, complicated thing. And like most things in this world, it involves rituals, rules, and a lot of worrying about whether you did it correctly. You shuffle to your feet and follow the sound of low, rhythmic wailing. Sure enough, a neighbour has died. You didn't know him well. You reach the small stone house. A few women sit in the doorway, faces streaked with ash, hair unbound, both symbols of mourning. They're wailing loudly and deliberately. This isn't spontaneous grief, it's ritual, because when someone dies in ancient Greece, you don't just weep. You perform your sorrow. Inside, the body lies on a low bier, wrapped in a clean cloth. The eyes have been closed, the mouth tied shut, the limbs arranged just so. A coin has been placed in the mouth or over the eyes. Honestly, it's enough to make you start saving change. A small brazier burns beside the body, filling the air with the smell of incense and charcoal. Women sing mourning songs. Brethroi, long, haunting laments that make your skin crawl. Some of them are hired professionals, moirolegoi, trained mourners who can weep on command and work the crowd like a tragic cabaret act. You join the other villagers outside the ekphara, the funeral procession. At dawn, the body is carried on a cart through the streets, followed by family, friends, and a few sympathetic onlookers. The cart creaks. The mourners chant. The air feels heavy, even before the sun rises. At the cemetery, a low hillside just outside the city walls, the body is either buried or cremated, depending on family tradition and finances. The grave is marked with a stele, a stone slab often decorated with relief carvings, the deceased shaking hands with loved ones or sitting serenely in sculpted farewell. You see one depicting a woman handing her child a dove. It's beautiful and quietly devastating. Offerings are placed beside the body: food, oil, wine, sometimes small clay figurines. These are gifts for the journey beyond, not because the dead can use them literally, but because not offering them feels dangerous. Forget to feed the dead, and they might come back hungry. And no one wants a hungry ghost. The ceremony ends, the family weeps, the crowd disperses. But for the living, the responsibility is just beginning. Because in ancient Greece, burial is only the first step. What follows is a complex calendar of commemorations: the Tricissimos, a 30-day memorial, the annual feast in the dead's honour, occasional visits to the grave to pour libations of wine, water, milk and honey. You might even break special cakes called melikratan over the grave. Fail to observe these duties, and you risk more than bad luck. You risk angering the dead. Some people even write curse tablets, thin sheets of lead etched with the names of enemies and buried with the deceased, hoping the spirit will deliver vengeance from beyond. It's petty, it's poetic, it's peak ancient Greece. Back at home, your mother sprinkles seawater around the threshold to purify the house. She mutters a few lines to Hades, god of the underworld, and Persephone, his equally ominous queen. You try to help, but she swats your hand away. You'll do it wrong and bring a ghost home. You back away, slowly. Now let's talk about that underworld. It's not hell. It's not heaven. It's more like a cosmic waiting room full of mist and silence, and the occasional judgmental shadow. Souls arrive, pay charon, and face the three judges, Minos, Rhadamanthus, and Aeacus. They determine your fate. If you were a total disaster in life, murderer, traitor, grave robber, you might end up in Tartarus, a gloomy pit of endless punishment. If you were unusually virtuous, you might earn a place in the Elysian fields, where the air smells like laurel and the poetry flows like wine. But most people? Most people go to the Asphodel Meadows, a grey plain of wandering where memories fade and eternity is mostly quiet. Some scholars argue that this bleak vision of the afterlife reflects the Greeks' focus on life. They didn't live for death. They feared it, respected it, but they didn't romanticize it. Others think it's a form of cosmic justice. Live well and you might remember who you were after you're gone. Still, there were alternatives. Mystery cults, like those of Orpheus or Eleusis, promised more comforting visions. They spoke of reincarnation, of golden meadows, of souls reborn into joy. These cults were secretive, symbolic, and deeply emotional. Initiates swore oaths, performed rituals, and were told that death was not the end. You once overheard a priestess say, "Those who enter Eleusis return not with knowledge, but with peace." You didn't ask questions. She looked like she could hex your eyebrows off. After lunch, bread, cheese, wine. You walk to the family altar and light a small flame. It's not a holiday, but something about today makes you want to say a quiet prayer. You whisper names you haven't said aloud before, some you barely remember, some you miss. You feel foolish, you feel calm. As night falls, the city is quiet again. A few people still linger at the cemetery, lighting oil lamps. A child sets a bundle of rosemary by a fresh grave. Her mother presses a kiss to her forehead and says, "He hears you." And maybe he does. Because in ancient Greece, death isn't an end. It's a doorway. It's a duty. It's something you carry. You crawl into your bedroll, the fire flickering low, the stars blinking gently overhead. Somewhere, the ferryman waits. And not for you. Not tonight. You've seen the dust settle on another day in ancient Greece. The aches in your body remind you you're alive, even if your feet sometimes beg to argue. Your thoughts wander through a maze of worn paths, from the cramped clay house of mourning to the buzzing of Gara, the sacred gymnasium, the smoke-filled temple of Asclepius, the noisy theatre, and the quiet graves outside the city walls. Each place, a piece of the puzzle. Each experience, a whisper of a world both familiar and alien. Tonight, let's slow down. Let the weight of it all sink gently into the quiet spaces where breath lengthens and thoughts soften. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine this. You're lying beneath an endless sky painted with stars that have watched over centuries of lives. Soldiers, poets, farmers, philosophers, each one weaving their stories into the fabric of this ancient land. You hear the distant murmur of the olive trees, their leaves rustling softly like a lullaby. Somewhere nearby, a river flows, a slow, steady song of water meeting stone, carrying secrets downstream. Feel the coolness of the night air brushing your skin, carrying the faint scent of jasmine and firewood. The world feels vast, yet intimately close. In this space between waking and dreaming, you let go of the chaos, the noise of the marketplace, the sting of the spear, the burden of unspoken rules. Here, there is only calm. The gods, once fierce and unpredictable, now seem like gentle shadows watching over you, silent and serene. You are safe. You are part of something timeless. Your breath flows easy. The rhythm of your heart slows. Your muscles release their grip on tension. And you understand that this ancient world, full of hardship, beauty, wonder, and strange customs, is not just a story of survival. It is a story of humanity, of people who laughed, loved, feared, and hoped just as you do, who sought meaning in stars, songs, and the stones beneath their feet, who, despite all odds, carved a place for themselves in the long story of time. So, as you drift towards sleep, let these images settle gently in your mind. The clay walls warmed by the sun, the shimmer of the amphorae in the market, the echo of a tragic chorus in the theatre, the solemn hush of the graveyard under moonlight. Let the world of ancient Greece fold softly around you like a well-worn cloak. And know that no matter where or when you are, you carry this story with you. A story of resilience, curiosity, and the endless dance between fate and choice. Rest now. Dream deeply. You are safe here. For now the gods smile. And the night is kind.